Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. I'm Morgan McClintock, the CEO of startup marketing agency Firebrand. We've launched this podcast to interview the best in the business, but I'm not going to do it alone. So please meet my co-hosts.
I'm Nicole Pytel, Firebrand's VP of Content Marketing.
And I'm Chris Ulbrich, Firebrand's Head of Media Relations.
I'm Ian Lipner, a tech PR and crisis communications veteran.
We'll drop a new episode each week, so there's plenty of fuel for your marketing fire. Get the spark you need to take your startup to a whole new level. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintock, and today we're going to be talking about programmatic advertising. So programmatic advertising is automated bidding and buying and delivery of ads over ad networks. And I always feel this topic is a little bit complex and opaque. What is exactly programmatic advertising? And it's being hugely disrupted by the death of the third-party cookie, by AI, by these made-for-advertising sites. So today we've invited in Sean Crawford, who's the CEO of Rhebus. They are a video ad network, and he has a long background in the ad network space. He and I actually met at a TechCrunch event back in 2006. And so I'm looking forward to talking to him about all of those trends to really unpack what is going on in programmatic and what can we as startup marketers expect over the coming year, and how should we be responding to these big trends that are impacting automated advertising and purchasing, and what does that mean for our marketing campaigns? So with that said, let's call in Sean Crawford from Rhebus. Hello, Sean. Welcome to Fired Up.
Hello, Morgan. Thanks for having me. This is great. Appreciate it.
Well, we're happy to have you. So for those that don't know you, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of your background.
Sean Crawford, CEO and founder of Rhebus. My background over the last, say, 25 years, because I'm of a certain age group now. My background is about 10 years in new technology in the early 2000s, just working through what was mobile and how could you do messaging on a phone, pre-iPhone, and how could you connect that to your home, home theater system or home box device with content, into advertising, digital advertising back in 2008. And so since 2008, I've been in digital advertising and most recently over the last, the years get long, don't they, Morgan? So in the last 14 years, let's say, in video and programmatic specifically. And I started my company about 8 years ago now. And that's my work background. Married, couple of kids, lots of pets in the house. That's me.
Great. So today we're going to talk about programmatic advertising. And for those that aren't familiar, just as a bit of background, when we talk about programmatic advertising, what do we mean?
The most basic explanation would be the automation of ad buying. We've all heard the story, it used to be at the 3-martini lunch and deals would get done. It certainly hasn't been that way for a long time, of course. But that was the old school way of getting ads into the newspaper, onto TV, et cetera. And then one of my first jobs in this space back in 2010, the first tech was we would work with publishers and we would take the keys they got from their ad network partners and we allowed them to put them into a waterfall, let's say a list inside of our technology. And then so the server could just go pick each one and make sure there was fill at a good price. That was one of the first things we were doing at Adapt TV way back in 2010. And a few competitors were doing something similar. And that was like the early days of programmatic, where you could not have to go in and just like each morning, you've got a website and each morning you got to go through and figure out which ad network to use that day. You could actually use a piece of technology to do that for you. It's of course gotten far more advanced than that from 15 years ago. Google, Facebook, the rest of them all do this at a very high functioning fashion to the tunes of billions and billions of dollars. But basically at its core, it's the automation of that ad buying and selling to optimize price and placement and fill.
If I have this right, you tell them the audience that you want to target, you give it your budget and your creative, and the programmatic platform, whatever it might be, does the rest. It finds those audiences based on the information that it has. It places the bid and executes the creative at that point. Do I have that right?
Yeah, correct. So you can imagine a big brand. I always use Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola would say, I'm targeting, men 18 to 40 in these 5 geos, right? In these 5 major cities, let's say, across the US. So they go to their creative agency gets the right creatives done. They go to their media agency that then goes to their tech partners, the Googles, the Facebooks, and some of the independents, the Trade Desk, et cetera, and says, this is the audience we're after. This is the geos we're after. This is our budget. This is how much we want to spend on a cost per thousand basis on the assumption it's a branding campaign. And then those people take that and put it into the machines. Let's say the machines go out and find that audience at that price point. So that's what it does.
So you mentioned Coca-Cola there as an example. Is this mainly like programmatic advertising? Is it mainly for B2C companies, or is this also something that a B2B company might also use?
It's very definitely something a company can use at a B2B level. And I think about, as a decision maker in our company, for certain areas, like which backend we use. We use AWS currently. Their competitors would love to have me switch. And so I do see these ads. I see them on LinkedIn. I can see them occasionally on the Google searches, because I'm in somebody's audience pool as a decision maker for certain services at a B2B level. We'll talk about Rhebus TV in a few minutes, hopefully, but this is something that we're going to do more of this year as a company. There are certain folks that we want to target to make a decision to bring their product to our platform. So we're going to have to get very good at this exact question of using programmatic advertising from a B2B company to target certain individuals and convince them that our product is great for them.
Right. So these are the networks already have built out those audiences, rather than the company uploading a list like you might sometimes do to LinkedIn. Here are the list of people I want to target. LinkedIn or Google will match them. Okay, I have that person based on their email or what have you. I'm matching those. I can serve ads directly to them. In a programmatic way, the ad networks, they already have some pre-built audiences, and depending on the criteria that you put in, they're going to then build a custom audience for you to advertise against. We've heard a lot about third-party cookies going away, and this is one of the main ways that these ad networks sort of build up these audiences. You visit a website, they put a cookie, lots of cookies actually, probably, from all the different ad networks on your machine, and then they see where you go to other websites, they see what you buy and your behavior, and they sort of build up a profile of, okay, this is a male, they're into golf and they live here, and they build up a profile, and then they put you into one of those audiences based on your behavior. But that is going away. Is this going to make programmatic advertising harder? What's going to happen with programmatic advertising if they don't have those kinds of signals?
The companies will never completely rely, or generally, I shouldn't say never, will generally not solely rely on an ad network's or their advertising partners' third-party data, correct? They're going to want to bring their own data in. And then the networks can say, okay, great, let's look at your data, let's match, let's see what we've got. Can we extend this out? Are there areas where we can do this? Maybe if you're targeting the web, can we also do it on mobile and find that audience in multiple places, right? But that brand, but generally speaking, they're going to have their first party data. It's a very valuable part of their advertising mix and how they get to their audience and how marketing can help drive revenue. That generally, however, is all dependent upon these cookies that sit in our browsers and in our apps and et cetera, for identifying who we are, hopefully not at a too specific individual level, right? But certainly at a generic level. So yeah, they're going to go away over the next few years. That date sort of keeps getting pushed back, and everybody's working on how to do that and how to, in the absence of that data, how can we target the right audience to make sure that I'm selling enough product, right? Is essentially what it comes down to. And I think the old school way of doing that was interest-based. We'll pool all these people together that have similar interests. We can see if they've, or well, I don't know if we can see, but do they have an interest in a car? Do they live in a certain area? Do they live in a certain zone? There's lots of demographic data that can be pulled in, like this zip code has this certain average income, let's say, or average home price or average purchase value at the grocery store or whatever. So there is data out there that doesn't rely on cookies. The trick then is how granular can you get to ensure or to increase your opportunity for affecting the sale? And so there's a lot of work going on in this space. Will it kill programmatic advertising? No, it'll just, the input will change into how to do that. There's way too much of an industry built up around programmatic advertising or automated advertising for it to go away, but it'll make it a little challenging. But you've seen Google, I can't remember what they call their program, but they have their whole program that they're trying to roll out over the next few years around how to do that identification on their network, let's say, when cookies do go away. So there's a lot of work being done in this space, and Facebook's been really good at this, for example.
Right. I mean, famously, when Apple switched off the capability of tracking on Apple devices, Facebook targeting went down massively, but they've managed since to bring back the performance of their ads to beyond where it was when they had the information. And so obviously we've had a long time, ad networks have had a long time to adjust to the cookieless world on this. So yeah, data enrichment probably is one of the ways, and I'm sure they've got other technical ways to work that out. You mentioned their first party data. A large brand or even a small startup, everyone has some first party data. It's the cookies that you have that when people visit your site, and in the most basic way, I guess, companies that do remarketing based on their various behaviors on their website. Maybe someone came to the homepage and then came to a landing page, to fill in a form, but I didn't fill it in. You can target that particular audience. So you've got first party cookies and you've got your list of here are my prospects or here are my customers. I want more of these. You can take that information and upload it into these ad networks. People often do it with Google and LinkedIn, but you can do it with them all into their DSP, I guess. What is the sort of best practice around that? When we talk about, are these the kind of data that companies normally have when we talk about first party data?
There's a whole field that is like way beyond my expertise around clean rooms and how do you move that data and what do you do with that data. You can imagine that these major brands, Coca-Cola doesn't want its first party data commingled with Pepsi's first party data at the trade desk or at Google or whomever. So there has to be this whole idea of it has to be separate from the competitor set or from any other. So it's got to be nice and clean and pure, but also usable in the technology that everybody else is using. That is sort of probably the sum total of my expertise on that area. But I can imagine very easily that if I'm uploading our Rhebus data into an ad network to target certain users to bring them over, I certainly don't want that data available to my competitors to also be able to target with their product. And so I would insist, even at our level, which is much smaller than a Pepsi or Coca-Cola or a Chevrolet, I would insist that how do we keep this separate, right? And how do we do that? But that's absolutely what we'd want to do because somehow those folks have indicated an interest in our product, somehow. And so we want to tell them more. We want to ask them to get our newsletter. We want to ask them to sign up for something, to try the product, whatever it is. And we certainly don't want to give a competitive advantage away to our competitors after the hard work we've done on that.
For large organizations, they can use some kind of customer data platform to kind of pull all that data from across their business, the transaction data, the website visitor data, the help desk data, or wherever it's coming from into one place, and then use that and serve that up to their ad partners in order to get a really good targeting for their ads. I'm interested in AI, like the impact of AI also on programmatic. Cookies are going away. That's one challenge. We're not getting the visitors coming to the site. We can't then cookie them as easily necessarily, although the publishers could because that's for their first party data. But if I'm typing in, I'm a user and I'm typing in my query into a chat bot, whether it's Gemini or whether it's Perplexity AI, and I get my answer there and there's no click, right? I never visit the website. The amount of information that the New York Times might have or any other publisher might actually get is going to go down. There's just not going to be as many clicks. And so they're not going to be able to have as rich a data set and the targeting. So how are the ad networks and programmatic companies thinking about this change, or do they even have a solution to this?
Let's go back to Facebook for a second, right? Like, so Facebook's, I don't want to say renaissance, but certainly their ability to stave off a huge threat to their ad business, which was Apple changing and enforcing privacy policies. I mean, Facebook went out at one point and said that in their earnings, they said, we expect a $10 billion revenue hit from these changes, right? And likely saw that. And then because they're really smart and they have a lot of really smart people and a lot of money to spend, they figured out that their AI tools could be improved and are actually better at understanding a user's intent or interests than what Apple had shut off from them. And so they've completely reversed their misfortune, let's say, at a revenue level from Apple's privacy change. And so they have used AI and machine learning. We'll call it AI. Everything's in the AI bucket today. But they have completely turned that around with their ability. And, there's a bunch written about this, and there's, 8-10 points in optimization. But it comes down to they are very good at understanding what their users are likely to do and what interests they are likely to show based on their activities on the platform. And they can do this globally at a massive scale. And this has helped them tremendously. And that is artificial intelligence, machine learning that is allowing them to do that. So at the basic level of an ad network, that's what they should be thinking. I'm sure they all are thinking about it, what they do at a much smaller level. For us, we think about it in terms of how can I comb through the massive sets of data that I have, and what tool exists or do we need to create that will allow me to comb through these massive sets of data and information and signals that we're getting and identify areas of optimization, things I missed. Like, what am I missing? What is the ad server not telling me? What is the DSP report not telling me? Not that they're holding something back, but what they're not seeing, right? Because the technology was built a few years ago. And so we think about that a lot at our level. And of course, we are smaller than these other folks. So they're absolutely thinking about that and how they can understand. How is Google going to use their systems to really understand user interests across their platform, right? And across their network, which isn't just Google properties. How are they going to do that on YouTube, right? How are they going to do that across their different properties? So I think that's a fascinating area of technology that will fundamentally change and improve the programmatic ad network business over the next, 5-10 years. From a chatbot standpoint, we used to not have ads in our AIM. I'm old enough, of course, to remember what AIM is. For those of you who don't, that's AOL's Instant Messenger from a million years ago. But, then Yahoo had Instant Messenger, Gmail. And for a while, a lot of those had ads in them, right? And they got a little annoying and they took up too much space and whatever. But they were there because they had data. They had FaceTime with the consumer. And so they tried this. In some cases, it worked. On AIM, it worked. And Gmail, I don't think I've seen too much on there. So what happens, let's say ChatGPT, right? What happens on that platform with all of the data they have? Can they then run some? They can. Will they? I don't know. I think the bigger question for these is their training sets are based on other people's content, right? This is the question going on in the industry right now. So the New York Times, are they going to be real thrilled about one of the chatbots running ads against a user when that chatbot's existence is owed to the New York Times work over the last 50 years? That's going to be a tricky area that will get sorted out at some point. But yeah, that data is going to exist in those bots more and more. And I just see from my own usage that I more and more am using one of these chatbots instead of a search engine because it is faster. It is direct to the point. It's not cluttered. So anyways, I don't know the answer as to where that's going. I think it'll be fascinating how that consumer facing part gets all sorted out. I think the back end of that has some work to do in terms of rights to that content.
Yeah, I'm very confident that if I'm Google and I have YouTube to train Gemini on, I'm going to be able to deliver an excellent service there. And obviously Google has some challenges in that it's disrupting its own massive ads business in a way that Perplexity is not. Those chatbots are going to be able to, monetize somehow. I mean, obviously, whether it's embedded in the thing or here's some, you're asking for recommendations on a vacation and it says, okay, here's some places that I would recommend and these ones are sponsored. You'll see those sort of creep in. But yeah, it's the other networks who are not part of it. Like if you're the chatbot and you've got the user query, you're fine. You've got the attention. But if there's no click to a small publisher that would normally have got that traffic, they're not going to be able to serve their ads. They're not going to be able to get that revenue. They're equally not going to be paid $60 million like Reddit is or the New York Times to be able to feed in, because who cares about this small publisher? What's that worth to the LLM? It's incremental difference that it's going to make. And so I do feel for the ad networks, some of that, and the publishers, some of that is a challenge.
So the publishers, I think, are interesting because Google's not going anywhere. Bing's not going anywhere, right? They're going to be around and they're going to be sizable for a while, right? And so this isn't a change that happens the consumer doesn't change, his or her behavior in a year or two, maybe over 5 or 10 years, certainly, right? So they'll be around. I wonder if there's you take Google, and Google's got all of these publishers that they work with, and they've got code on all of these pages and all of these apps that we use every day, right? For the purpose of serving ads and generating revenue for these publishers. So I wonder if they go to them and say, hey, we're going to be training up our AI at Gemini, right? At Google, right? We're going to be training up and we understand that it's run on all of your stuff. So they have two options. Google can change their terms and service and just say, we're doing this. Or they could go out and cut deals, and they could cut deals with their entire network and just figure out what that looks like. I don't know what the model there would be, but Reddit selling its data for $60 million, you can see what Twitter's going to do with XAI. You can see they've got a data set that they can train it on, and they're going to be a player, I imagine, in the space. They own their data set. And so what is Google going to do with all the publishers in its network? What is Bing going to do, with OpenAI and all the network? Is there a deal to be had that's just like a rights management tool, almost like you have for the music industry or something like that? Some sort of umbrella that just then pays everybody their percentage cut, let's say. I don't know how that would work. Maybe they just change their terms of service and say, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. Historically, the news industry has not worked together in the same way as the music industry did. And right. Collaborated to say, hey, we're taking all this stuff off unless you play ball. And historically, Google just runs straight over them.
Correct. And takes all of that value for their own share price, right? And for their own executives and their own staff and whatever. And, good on them, right? I mean, good on Google for being able to figure that out and do that. I think that's very problematic for any decent sized publisher. And for the smaller publishers, figuring out a way to participate in some things so that you're getting whatever your percentage fair share is, I think is interesting.
Speaking of publishers, there are also a lot of these sort of made for advertising websites that are popping up. They're AI generated. They're mainly around sort of products that they claim to have reviewed that they haven't, but high intent search query, websites that are aimed to capture high intent search queries and then, bring you in and to just sort of serve you a bunch of ads, but it's low value content. What's your take on that trend? How does that pan out?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? On the one hand, they figured out the algorithm, right? They figured out how to show up high in search, and they've figured out all of the ad operational aspects to ensure a heavy ad load so that they make good money. So that's clearly not what the advertiser is going for, right? That's clear. Most advertisers don't want to be, one of 50 ads on a page or one of 10 ads on a page or on a janky site, whatever. On the other hand, the other side of that coin is generally the traffic to those sites isn't fraudulent. Generally, those are real folks clicking on those sites. That's a real set of eyeballs. That's a real individual. And so you are getting some part of their attention. And I think it's the Trade Desk. I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's the Trade Desk and a few others have said they're classifying MFA sites as being IVT, right? Is the traffic they don't want, invalid traffic. It's traffic they don't want. So I think that'll probably happen more. And to some extent, this will probably be a self-correcting issue for most of it over time, because the industry, the buyers will just be like, that's not what we meant. Good job. Good on you. Whatever. It's not what we're after. That's not what we meant. And then hopefully those ads then trickle down to the better quality sites. I think at some level it'll be self-correcting. It'll never fully go away, but I think it's probably, I haven't tracked the data on this in a bit, but I think it's probably reached its peak because there was a lot of attention on it at Programmatic IO back in October last year. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of talk about how to minimize spend on those sites. So I imagine we've probably seen our peak on that. I hope so.
Yeah. And just recently, Google has announced that it's doing its part to kind of detect these sites and then derank them so that you've got less traffic in the first place. So the combination of less traffic and the advertisers
right,
just not feeding
the financial incentive goes away for the owners of the sites to keep at it, right? So they move on to something else. That's right.
Yeah, it's just that they cost almost nothing to produce, and they're taking over old domains that did have some ranking. So it's a little bit complex. But on this, whilst we're talking about publishing, on the publishing side, rather than the advertiser side, I know that Rhebus, you have a video management platform and you have this distribution service, Rhebus TV, and you work with filmmakers and creators to sort of get their content onto various platforms and sort of generate ad revenue for them. Talk to me a little bit about that and the work you're doing.
So I founded Rhebus back in late 2016. I like to tell the story. I had a really big, cool executive job, right? Lots of responsibility, making good money. And I got laid off, and I was 46 and a mortgage and 2 kids in private school. And I was like, this seems like a great time to start my own company, right? And thankfully it's worked out. But, there's certainly no certainties when you have that situation. But thankfully, wife and kids are very supportive and it's worked out. But we started the company on this premise of building a base of mobile ad publishers that we would curate and just be smaller than everybody else and curate that and get that out in front of folks and be a higher quality option for folks. Smaller, so you can't spend all your budget with us, but it's going to be the higher quality portion of it. That's done well over the years. And so we are now saying, okay, let's invest from that and let's take the next step, which is started out as CTV. So about 3 years ago, we started building out a platform that we could ingest, like a video management platform, ingest the video and distribute it multiple places on the web, on mobile, and onto CTV platforms. And this really sort of took off during the pandemic because we had a lot of time to sit around and work. So we did, and really built out the CTV part of it. And then over the last few years, and we're really just kind of rolling out commercially that platform over the last 6 months. We have really focused it in on CTV over the last, say, 18 months. So today, that platform, I spend a lot of time with independent filmmakers and getting their films onto our platform. And then we use that and we put it on our channel, and then we make it available in our marketplace. So other channels that are on our platform can also pick up that content and get on their channel. And we've got a really good connection into Roku and Fire TV, which is Amazon's platform right now, and building out others. So it's a really cool place to be because we are a publisher. Our Fancy a Movie channel, which is the logo back there, if you can see it. We are a publisher. We spend a lot of time curating inventory, movies, music videos, and getting under what we think people want to watch. And we spend a lot of time advertising, picking up folks to come in and watch those videos and then marrying them with advertising to help pay the bills. It's an interesting challenge. I started this company on the thesis that I would never build ad tech. And here I am. I say I am not building anything. I'm not an engineer, but I have an engineering team and we're building technology. So that thesis lasted about 5 years and then we changed that. And so it's really fun. So it's really fun. We spend a lot of time, like you said, working with filmmakers, working with other folks who have their own content and maybe don't like the platform where they're working, or they're cost wise, or for whatever reason, they're looking for a new platform to house all of their videos, to distribute them. They bring them to us and we get them up and going on Roku, and right now on Roku and Fire TV. And then we've got a couple other in the hopper that we're working on.
So when you say CTV, what you mean is, because I'm not familiar with it, you mean Roku, you mean Fire TV, and there will be other of these sort of OTT networks that you can kind of integrate with and distribute.
Yeah, there's the idea. There's OTT, CTV, and fast channel, whatever. Essentially, this is watching video on your television that's not, say, through broadcast, right, or cable. So you have Paramount Plus, you have Netflix, you have all the big ones, right? And then Roku is really interesting because Roku not only has its own channel, Roku, I think it's called the Roku channel is the official name. They've got some great content in there. They picked up Quibi's content a few years ago when they sold. And then they also have their platform where you can build a channel on their platform. And then that's available on the devices that support Roku. And Amazon, of course, has Prime. It's got Fire TV, which is the same thing as Roku's platform. And so we work in that space. And we work to either ingest, if someone's already got a channel, we'll give them a feed of content onto that channel. If they don't have a channel, we can help them get one and get up on those platforms.
And so who would want a channel? Like, give me an example of a company that might want a channel. I mean, we work with startups, right? Are we thinking of B2B companies are creating their own content? I mean, lots of them have YouTube channels or what have you. Would they then distribute would they go, oh, I've already got this stuff and I've put it up on YouTube, we're getting lots of views there, which is great, but we've got all this educational material, it's very specific about my SaaS product or about how to, do a particular task. Would they create a channel on a platform like this for Roku, or is it more filmmakers, as you said, and, independent artists? Just sort of give me a bit of a picture of that.
I think there's a couple of different use cases. The media aspect of it, right? The entertainment media aspect of it is very clear, right? It's a TV channel. So you're going to watch content. You're going to watch movies. You're going to watch TV programs, music videos. Fine. That's a really clear model that we're all familiar with. A couple of the use cases that we've talked to some folks about are around, so two in particular. One is an events company that does events for folks that are educational events. They're not an events like they do any events. They have a certain area that they function in, and they put on educational events like conferences and stuff. And then they want a place to put that's secure, that everybody has access to, that they can give them a code and get access to. The other use case that we're exploring is more along the lines of that B2B use case. And there's two examples here. One is talking to a company, and they do educational events. They're in a very particular sector, and they put on events and conferences and webinars, et cetera. So they're looking for a place to house that's easily accessible to the folks who attended or the folks who couldn't attend, right? And so we're working through them the use case of like, okay, so we have this channel. It's specific to Roku. Let's say, well, in our case, first of all, it's on our platform. We're going to bring all of your content onto our platform, and you can tag it up the way you need to tag it up. We'll create the categories you need to create, and then we can distribute that a couple of places for you. One, we can put it on Roku. You can have your own channel, and super simple, super straightforward channel, and that can be login gated, for example. And that same setup can be then pushed and distributed to your website if you want it as well. Our platform will handle both of those. It's just, we've created the distribution codes for those. So we're talking to them about, is that useful to you? And it may be, and it may not be, but it is an interesting use case to them. The other one is a B2C, but not a media, which is, it's a group, one of these resort towns. And we're talking to their tourism board, and they're like, well, okay, why don't I get 10 or 20 of these various places in town to contribute the funds, and we'll put up a tourism channel about this town, this resort town. And we'll go out and we'll tell people about it. It'll be on the channel. They'll have their own channel. And then they could also run ads if they wanted to on the other channels. So those are some of the non-direct media use cases, like entertainment media use cases that we're in active conversations right now that are interesting. And personally, I hope we close them because it'd be great. But I also want to make sure that it works for them. It's not just sell at all costs, right? It's like, let's make sure that this works for you. And if it does, then let's do this. And it'll be super interesting and super fun.
So if I'm a company and I have a lot of content that I want to distribute on my website or on mobile or over, onto a TV, like anything that has Roku, and I can either gate it or I can run advertising against it to monetize it, then this is an option. Or maybe I'm part of an organization with other companies that are all aligned around a particular mission, and we want to coalesce all of our content together to create enough to create a channel about a particular topic or towards a particular mission. Then we could work together to do that and distribute it to a whole bunch of different audiences in whatever way we want, whether it's gated or monetized or just for distribution.
Yeah, or just for distribution, right? That's exactly right. And one of my core jobs every day is to grow the number of platforms that we distribute to.
Yeah.
So, I've got a list on my wall right over here of all the various platforms that we want to be able to distribute into for folks' content. And so it gets infinitely more interesting in terms of scale and audience reach over the course of a year.
Yeah. I think that's important because a lot of companies, they're all about inbound marketing. They create a ton of content. They're investing heavily in video. They're producing all this material, and then they put it up on YouTube, or maybe they put it on their website, but they're not getting it. They're certainly not getting it onto people's TVs in people's houses. And so how do we do, unless it's through YouTube. So how do we do that? Here's a mechanism, a platform like Rhebus or others that can deliver that. So I want to just turn a little bit now towards the future. Like, what do you see coming for programmatic advertising and paid media in general over the next year?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of bigger topics that I like to pay attention to. Privacy is always one. I think this is led a lot by the European Union and to some extent California regulation, right? And then the US say in third behind that. Not that we do a bad job by any means. It's just a little bit more open, right? In the US in particular. But GDPR has been a challenge for the industry, of course, but ultimately the industry has figured out how to work within that, and arguably consumers are better for it. And the new one, I guess the new piece of that that's being enforced this year is called DSA. Don't remember what it stands for, but it basically means that the ad has to show where it comes from, right? Who's paying for it, where it's coming from. And so I think that gets really interesting. So now the consumer knows, is it too much? I don't know. Time will tell. Is it too much? Is it too little? I don't know. Time will tell. But privacy, I think, is really important.
Yes.
It's really easy to get access to personal data and use it. How do we ensure it's not being used for nefarious purposes? How do we ensure the consumer knows what's going on? I think that's important, and that impacts all of our businesses, right? And because we have to operate in that environment. There's a great story recently. I don't know if you read it. A couple of years ago, the U.S. government figured out that soldiers and folks in government were giving away their location in private facilities around the world, in secure facilities around the world. And how was that happening? Well, apparently a lot of them were using Grindr. The ad data from Grindr is how they were being located.
Oh, wow.
Because the cookies and the personal data that was being exposed by that app to the ad networks is how, they found. So they've gone through and closed those loops and whatnot. But it was an interesting use case around why privacy is so important. AI, obviously going to be the big one.
Yeah.
And how folks use that. Again, how are we as a smaller company going to be using AI in our business beyond the chatbot that helps me do my job every day, right? Like, how am I going to be actually using it in the production of our work or the operations of our work? And the last one I'll say is the one that I think is interesting for us is, that I almost hate to say it, but I'm going to say it anyways, is blockchain.
Oh.
And I won't claim to be a blockchain expert, but a couple of the DevOps guys on the team have come back and said, hey, we should be thinking about how we use the blockchain for certain pieces of our streaming and our CTV business. And so we're actually in active investigation about, is there a way to use that to be more efficient with the way we're streaming? And maybe we're not the first ones to think about it. Maybe this work has already been done, but it's an interesting area for us as they come out of their trough, perhaps the blockchain, and it actually, there's some use cases for it, perhaps streaming or something around that is one of them.
That's interesting, rather than around sort of the rights to the, assuring the rights to the content or, proving engagement or something that needs to
Correct. Or even just the efficiency of the stream itself, right? Can it be more efficiency? I don't know if it can. I don't know. We could be wrong in our hypothesis, but we're going to investigate that hypothesis and see if there's a there for us.
Do you have any final thoughts before we move on to our next section, or advice for brands about paid media?
We do a fair amount of this on the user acquisition side, and it comes down. We've tested a few different areas. We've tested Google. We've tested obviously Roku. This is super obvious, but it comes down to, does that spend and the price of that spend work?
Right.
So I think that cost and that price per acquisition is where the focus needs to be.
Right. Focusing on attribution, on the ROAS, making sure that we're spending it. And I think that's definitely an important topic for a lot of our clients. And I think definitely when it comes to ad spend, you need to make sure that you're spending it in the right way. So our next section is called our Fired Up 5, and this is our quick fire round with a range of sort of, personal and more professional questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. What would you do if you weren't in marketing?
If I didn't have to make a living, Morgan, I'd probably be cooking and making cocktails for people. I think the creativity of the kitchen and the bar are something that I enjoy a lot. So from a personal standpoint, I find that super fun. If I had to make a living still, it would probably be real estate. I don't know a lot about the ins and outs of real estate. I find it fascinating. I find it intellectually stimulating, and I've never done it at a point where I've had to make money at it. So I think that would be like intellectually interesting.
Right. Buying and selling bars and restaurants sounds like...
Yes, totally.
What's the best career advice that you've ever been given?
I was a teenager and I got a job. My uncle gave me a job and he's like, just do the work. Just do the work, get good at the work. And then when you're good at it, learn something else and get good at that and just keep moving forward. And that was kind of over the course of a summer working for him. It was like, just do the work. Just do the work, get good at it, do the next one, keep moving. So I try and keep that to heart.
What book do you most often recommend?
I'm going to give two if I can. One, it goes back a few years. We have a daughter. She's in college now, as you know. But when she was younger, someone recommended a book to me that I've now recommended to a bunch of dads as they have girls, little girls. And it's called Untangled. And it's a book by Lisa. I wrote it down here. Lisa D'Amour is her name. But it's about young girls from preteen to college age and what they go through vis-a-vis the parents and what we should understand about that process to better be partners and parents to them. That was really helpful to me, and I've recommended that to a bunch of dads over the years. And then the other one is Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That is an all-time classic and has fundamentally altered the way I interact with the world in a lot of ways to not be, so frustrated by little things and just to really focus in where it's important.
Also has a great podcast. It's super fun.
Oh, really? I have not listened to his podcast. Is it good?
Cool. It's good. Yeah, it's good if you like his style. What's the strangest job that you've ever done?
So going back to my summer of 1987, when I was 16 years old working for my uncle, I had to climb into a storm drain with a paper set of blueprints. And this is a storm drain that was not functioning, hadn't been turned on yet.
Okay.
Just for clarification. And a tape measure. And I had to hook up the little air vent machine, and I had to measure it all over the course of a quarter mile or so, two of us, to make sure that it was to the plans, to the specs of the plans, and then write it all down and then report back on that. That was pretty awesome. I spent a couple of days doing that in 105-degree heat.
We have different definitions of the word awesome, but
that was great. I can talk on a podcast about being in a storm drain.
Underground QAing the size of a storm drain. Well, someone needs to do it, and 16-year-old Sean sounds like the perfect candidate. What are you excited about for 2024?
Ad tech in general, I spent a little time on the in-game side of the business, and I think, and I'm hoping this year is where the standards and the technology and the media spend of in-game advertising comes into play, where you're actually in the flow of the game, the billboards on the racetrack, et cetera. I'm excited about that space in general, and I hope this year it really starts to take off. That's what I'm excited about in the industry. And then at work, I'm excited about Rhebus TV. That's our new venture, and we're going to spend a lot of time and investment on that, and I'm excited about that going well. So those are the two areas.
By in-game, you mean video game, or you mean live sports?
Video games. So you imagine your mobile phone, you're playing a game, and rather than just at the bottom of the game, it's actually in the game. You can imagine when you play any one of these sports games or racing games on your console, there are ads in the game. They're just fake brands that live in the world of the game. So what if those were real brands, right? That would be super interesting.
Yeah, I worked with a company, I think it was called Double Fusion, who did that. They served ads, for racing car games or sports games onto those billboards. And also there was another one in a virtual world where you can track people's eyes and you can see where they're looking, and you can have if you're building a virtual world of a city, of course, there's going to be out-of-home advertising in it. And the good thing is you can actually see where those people are looking, and you can see the impressions you're getting from the avatars. And the challenge was just technically it's a hard thing to do, and B, just the volume. Are you getting enough impressions to make the integration and the running of those ads worth it? But super fascinating. And in-game advertising is a great space. Sean, you're the CEO of Rhebus, which, as we've heard today, is an ad tech company and has its own video management platform. If people want to reach out to you, where should they go?
You can hit our website at Rhebus.tv or on LinkedIn. I'm Sean W. Crawford on LinkedIn. You can hit me up there.
Listen, Sean, really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for joining us here on Fired Up.
Thank you, Morgan, for having me. This is great. Really appreciate it.
We'll talk to you soon. Well, that about wraps it up for today. But before we close, we did want to offer all of our Fired Up friends a chance to grab a mega pack of all of our ebooks and guides. That's our guide to content marketing. That's our startup guide to paid media using Google Ads. It's our guide to attribution. You can get all of those, over 100 pages of goodness, at firebrand.marketing/firedup freebies. That's freebies with an S. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts, or drop us a note at firebrand.marketing. And as ever, the details of how to get in touch with our guest today can be found in the show notes. Thank you for listening. And until next week, get out there and crush your marketing goals.